Hello, everyone. Welcome to Strategy and Stories, where we look at strategic communications for local business. I'm your host, Daniel Rich. Brook Farell is account manager at Reed Public Relations, a national PR firm and marketing company based in Nashville, Tennessee that works with brands across the country. She's a graduate of Auburn University, War Eagle, with a BA in Public Relations. She has had internships at Not Edie and Rapid Fire Pizza and has experience working at Ohio Valley Goodwill Industries, Auburn's University's College of Liberal Arts School Council, Victoria's Secret Pink, and J. Crew Factory before joining Reed Public Relations. Brooke, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you talk with us a little bit in depth on what you do at Reed right now? And congratulations on your recent promotion and maybe what you possibly do a little bit in that role.
Yes, yeah, thank you so much. So I have been with Reed for about 2 years now. I started as an intern, so I worked up to account manager. So in my role now, I do a lot of the day-to-day work with clients. I'm more on the strategy side and more leading the client plans versus the kind of back end support work, which is what I was doing when I started. So as an intern, as an account coordinator, I was, drafting press releases, media lists, all of that. Now that I'm on the account management side, I'm working a little bit more in about like the overall media relations plan that we have for our client, what we want to see out of that, goals, those kinds of things, as well as pitching local media, working on social media, kind of anything else that's thrown our way. But that's really my main role.
Yeah, and how many people are you kind of managing?
So we have a total of 12 people at Reed. So we have 3 members of senior leadership, and then we have a senior account coordinator level or a senior account manager level, and then we have account managers. So there's 3 of us, and then we have a couple account coordinators and a couple interns below that. So we're all kind of mixed in together. We all work on clients together. So I don't have one part of that team that's mine. It's kind of all of us working together, managing each other. Since we are a smaller boutique firm, it works out really well that way.
Okay, and how many clients are y'all currently working with?
Oh, okay. So I currently work on 9 clients. I'm
Wow.
trying to do some math really quickly in my head to see how many we have as a whole, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull that math out very quickly. But I would say we're probably somewhere in like the 20 to 30 clients range.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I just started my first internship, and so I do sort of the community relations aspect on social media, but we outsource a lot of our social media posts, especially regarding sales and marketing, to an agency. So just like seeing, I guess, sort of that side or working with them has definitely helped me understand and appreciate agency work. I know it's got to be fast paced.
Yes.
Yeah. Since we're talking about media relations today, where I guess was sort of your first introduction to media relations work? Was it possibly at one of your internships? Was it more in kind of one of your more professional roles? When was like your real first exposure to that side of things?
Honestly, it was in classes at Auburn. We had quite a few media relations classes specifically, so we really focused on it since it is such a large part of the industry. And it was a great way to learn about the tools like Cision or Muckrack and also kind of see the ins and outs of the reporter side of things. So it could kind of give us a better understanding and appreciation for reporters as we're working on the other side of that. But as far as working, I did not do much media relations work in my internships. I did a lot of community relations and marketing internships since that's kind of what I thought I wanted to do. So my first real media relations introduction was at Reed, and I have absolutely loved it. And I'm so glad it worked out this way that that's what I'm doing for a living.
Can you, because I'm actually interested in this, can you talk a little bit about what Muckrack is?
Yes, Muckrack is great. Muckrack, I think I have it open on my computer 24/7. It's just a tab that lives there. It is basically like a end all be all for media that you could need. There's different reporters and outlets listed in there. They've got their preferences of how to be reached, when to reach out, how they like to be pitched. You can get their contact information. You can look at past articles they've written. You can find any kind of coverage from your own clients. Like you type in your client's name and any coverage comes up so you can track their media hits. You can build media lists in Muckrack. It's just kind of an end all be all tool for all things media outreach. It is so very helpful to have. It's obviously not our only way of building media lists. We still do it the old school way where we go to the website and we find the reporters and we pull their emails that way. But Muck Rack's a great way to kind of check on things and pull everything together.
And yeah, often from what experience I have, that seems to be half the battle is really just figuring out what reporters, what writers are willing to cover you, who's in your area. So that sounds like a really great tool. And is that something y'all use at Reed?
Yes, yeah, we have it. We have a few accounts for our team, so everyone can have access to it. And it's a great tool. I mean, I think I probably am in it at least once a day, checking something, whether that's a client hit or looking for an email for a reporter or looking for a piece of coverage, anything like that.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to look into that. So, what exactly does media relations, as you define it, what does it do for an organization and why is it needed?
So it really helps build brand awareness. Everyone has their preferred media outlet, reporters they trust, outlets they trust, whether that's through their social pages or reading the paper every day or getting online or watching the news. And so it builds brand awareness because when someone that you trust is talking about something, you're going to listen. So it's really just a way to build that awareness and grow your business's public image.
Yeah, and another side of things that I think is really interesting is I feel like it really works to build credibility because, of course, you can put stuff out on your own channels, whether that be social media, whether it be, a brochure, whether it be a billboard. But when it actually comes from that third party, from someone in the media giving you that earned media, I feel like that's a lot more credible. And is that something that you think is true of media relations?
Definitely to a point, yes. You always have to be careful because, as a whole, the public is becoming a little less trusting of mainstream media. So you've got to make sure that you're coming at it from the right angle and making sure that it makes sense and it fits. So picking the right outlet or reporter that is an expert in what you're trying to get across definitely helps build the credibility. But as I mentioned, I think it's just coming from someone who people trust is going to help build the credibility, especially it's going to help introduce them to new people. Like you mentioned, putting stuff out in your own channels is great, but it's reaching people that already know who you are. And through media, you can help reach new audiences that may not know who you are, and then they can go look into the content that you're putting out on your own.
Yeah, and what you just said really touched me because it's like there's two sides of it. We're at a point where I feel like national media and bigger publications are starting to be trusted less. And of course, I think smaller publications, at least around where I am, are sort of dying. But I kind of feel like that distrust in bigger publications, who have donors, who have a lot of funding, I almost feel like that's sort of creating a rise in the smaller, like local publications again.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. We have a paper in Nashville that had been defunct for a while that has recently come back. They're not privately funded and they really are just there to share issues that people care about, and their return to the media industry has been taken up very very happily by the Nashville community as like a good local paper. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and now we're going to be entering our scenario segment, Brooke. So I'm going to provide you with a scenario, and I just want to hear your response to it.
Okay.
So, you want to get coverage by a local news publication, but your organization has no history with them. Describe your process for reaching out and what might you initially say to someone.
So the first thing I would do is I would go look at the staff page. I would find which reporter I think this is going to resonate with, who I think would be the right fit, someone that's maybe covered similar stories before, someone that's maybe covering issues relevant to that client. And I would just reach out to them and I would be like, hey, so nice to meet you. My name's Brooke. I work with so and so. I'd give them a little bit of information about the client. I'd say I'd love to take you out to coffee, go get a lunch, whatever, and chat more to see where maybe there could be a fit, what you're currently working on, how I can make it easier to work with you, and just kind of get their side of things instead of just sending a pitch, because I would want to make sure that what I'm pitching them is going to resonate with what they want to report on.
So, personal connection before pitch.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, and do you think like typically taking them out to lunch or a dinner or just somewhere to sort of meet up, is that typically, I guess, the best way to approach that?
I always prefer in person over email for getting to know each other. I mean, if they're not located in Nashville or if I'm, pitching another market where that's not possible, hopping on a phone call works as well. But I always like to get that communication via whether it's phone call or in person and not just email. So whenever it's in person, I always offer to grab coffee or lunch just to see a time that they're going to be available to chat. But any way that I can just have an overall conversation with them, because sometimes it's not even about one client. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'd love to know how we can work with you better. How can I make your job easier? And figuring that out is the best way to get on their good side and help them out. Reporters are very, very busy these days, so I want to make their job easier. I just definitely never want to have a sigh or an eye roll when they see my email come through. I want to make sure that we are working together.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was just at Icon, and Gio Benitez, who's one of the anchors for Good Morning America, he sort of provided an interesting take. He's like, if you have that established relationship with a reporter and maybe they're busy, if you want to catch their eye and get them to read your email, he said, see if you can mention the word exclusive in the header box and see if that gets their attention. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever tried that tactic? Do you know anybody that tries that tactic?
That is a very mixed use topic. I think that is something, if you're trying to get a bigger publication, that is a great way to do it. Those people are getting, I mean, thousands of emails in their inbox every day. But for maybe a smaller piece, something that's a little more lifestyle based, it's not going to be an exclusive. So sending that is kind of like clickbait on honestly. We try to avoid doing that. So I think
That is true.
if it's a bigger outlet that you're trying to place in, someone who's getting a ton of emails in their inbox every day, that is a great way to cut through the noise. But you just want to make sure that if you're offering an exclusive, you can follow it up and it's exclusive worthy.
So if you are going to do that, make sure it's ethical, is what I'm hearing.
Make sure you can back it up.
Yeah, yeah. And so kind of staying within this scenario, is there any difference, say, if you were to, reach out for that first time, is there any difference in approach between reaching out to someone maybe in national media versus local, or is it kind of the same thing?
I think it really kind of depends on the story that I'm pitching. Like if I'm pitching a local business owner, I'm going to pitch a different story to a national business outlet than I would to a local business outlet because the local business outlet's going to want that community tie versus, the bigger national ones, they're going to want the stats and the data behind it. So if that's the story I'm pitching, that would be a little different. I think it kind of depends more on the angle than it does the outlet in general. But if it's local, anytime I can invite the reporter to have an interview in person, sit down, see the space is always a great way to continue building that relationship, which obviously you can't do with national all the time. So that would be another difference there.
Yeah, I didn't think about proximity. That's a really good point.
Yes, we love to host reporters whenever we can. Get them in the space, see it, feel it, experience it. It always just makes for a more well-rounded interview whenever it's possible.
And talking about really initially building those relationships, how do you maintain those relationships? Is it maybe more of a continuation of just feeding them information? Is it maybe actually reading their work and letting them know you like it? Kind of what does that maintained relationship look like?
Well, first and foremost, I'm out there networking whenever possible. Nashville, everyone says it's a small town in a big city, so you see everyone everywhere. And I love to go to any kind of industry events where reporters are there and just be like, "Hey, so good to see you. Let's catch up." Again, just like taking them out for a coffee and seeing like what they're working on. Even if you have a relationship, it's always great to hear what they're working on, what they want to be working on, any ways you can help them. And I also love this is actually input from one of my mentors. She was like, I'll sometimes send them over something that I saw that's not for one of my clients, but I think would be a great fit for them to show them like I'm here for your work, not just for my work. So that's something that if I see and it's like a small local business and they clearly don't have a PR firm that's pitching for them, but I saw them doing something cool, I'll shoot a note over to a reporter like, hey, I just saw this. You might want to check it out. Like, not my client, just wanted to let you know. And giving them news tips, even when it's not your client, is always helpful.
Yeah, and I think that really hits on what you said earlier, which kind of our goal is to really make their job easier. So kind of feeding them that extra information that necessarily doesn't even have to do with your organization. I think that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll never send like a whole full-fledged pitch of it, but I will send like a quick two-line email of, "Hey, I just saw this. Thought it might be your up your alley. Like, just wanted to send it your way," kind of thing. Keeping it easy because again, like you said, we want to keep their jobs easy. They all have inboxes full of people sending them stories, and they've got a lot going on. So whenever I can do something to help, that is what I'm going to do.
I think we've gotten very into the working directly with people in the media side, so kind of taking more of that general approach now. What key skills do you think are essential for someone to have to be successful in media relations?
You've got to be thick-skinned. You've got to be willing to take a lot of no's or a whole lot of silence, because you'll send out 20 pitches and you'll maybe hear back from two people. Like you've got to be thick-skinned and willing to bounce back. You've also got to be persistent, but we always like to say pleasantly persistent. You never want to be spamming their inbox, but like if you sent a pitch a couple weeks ago and there's some new data to back it up, just sending a quick follow-up with some more information like, hey, I saw this data, really kind of back to this point, would love to just send it your way, see if we could chat, keeping it, again, pleasant but persistent, because that's what's going to take to get a story. And like I said, to get through their inbox, they're getting so many emails. So you don't want to be spamming them, but also a follow-up every once in a while is sometimes necessary, because I know even me personally, I'll open an email and forget about it. And then if they follow up, I'm like, oh my goodness, thank God that's back to the top of my inbox. So trying to do that and be pleasantly persistent. And then also just you got to be a good writer to send a pitch
Yeah.
that's going to catch their attention. They're getting so many pitches, and you want to catch their attention with the headline, with the first line. You want to make sure that you're keeping it concise but still informative and worth reaching out for more information.
Talking about media relations, something that I hadn't even necessarily thought of. During my internship this past week, we had this big community involvement event workout, and we actually got it covered by a local publication. And something that I hadn't even thought about is, they put their article on their Facebook page, and I was able to share that via our social media and get earned exposure from that. So do you think that social media plays an important role in media relations as well, and what are some other ways that it can be used in that way?
Oh, absolutely. I would say 9 times out of 10, when we secure a piece, we're on their socials checking to see if they shared it. A lot of times, it's so easy to just share the link directly to Facebook, so we'll do that. Same with LinkedIn, same with Twitter, Instagram. Sometimes they can mix it up and get a little more like a different side of the story on their Instagram as well. So it's definitely a huge part in that. I also love Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it, for staying in touch with reporters. They will often share their stories that they've written about, but they'll also share random tidbits and pieces of information, data. It's just a great way to keep up with what they're interested in like a non-creepy stalking way. It's just a great way to stay up to date with them, especially when you maybe aren't seeing them in person as often. So I love Twitter or X for that.
I really hadn't thought about that, and I feel like we're at such a touchy point with Twitter or X, simply because of course, Elon runs it now, and everything going on with that, and it's really, you have to be, I think, in a certain type of organization for your organization itself to have that as a social media account, but
Hmm.
in terms of actually using it yourself to keep in touch with reporters, to show your support of them, I really hadn't thought about that. So is that more of a, just liking what they put on there, giving a comments? I guess sort of elaborate maybe a little bit more on what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just following along and seeing what they post. It's similar to LinkedIn, but like a little more broad, of they're going to share a little bit more than they would on LinkedIn. So, like I said, you can see the stories that they're writing, which obviously you can see those on the website, but it's just easy to like do a quick 10-minute scroll every morning and be like, oh, this reporter is writing about so and so. That's great to know. And any like data, they'll also reshare information that they find interesting. So they'll retweet something and you'll be like, oh, they found that interesting. That's some good data. That's good to know. So it's more clocking what is being shared, again, in like a non-creepy stalking way, because we're not
Yeah.
actually like, I'm not deep in their likes figuring everything out about their life, but just seeing the information that they're sharing from their personal page kind of correlates well to what they're going to be sharing as a reporter.
Absolutely. I'm gonna have to make a note of that too, because that's a route I had not even thought about. So now we're going to enter our case study segment, specifically to give you an opportunity to talk about your experiences, in the professional setting. So my question to you is, what challenges have you faced in media relations? Maybe a specific instance, and what did you do to overcome those challenges?
One thing I will say, in general that we're facing a lot is it's a lot more pay for play and a lot less earned these days just to keep the publications alive. They're doing a lot more ads. So securing a fully earned piece is harder than ever. So we've really started adding client created data to our pitches. So instead of pulling industry data, we're talking to our clients. We're like, hey, what kind of data can you give me on this topic that's straight from you, basically creating them as a source instead of pulling another source that relates to what they're doing. So that's been a big push. Not all clients are able to give us data, not everyone tracks it, so it's not always an option, but that's been one thing that I've found has been able to break through the noise a little bit more. And then the other half of that is working with clients who are in industries that are a little more salesy to begin with, like,
Hmm.
the working with service-based clients who are, maybe they're your home security, they're your pest control, they're your those kind of things where it's harder to find that earned story in there. And so what we've really tried to focus on is instead of trying to do a story where it's like, you know, watch out for these bugs kind of thing that's going to come across a little more salesy. We'll do a story about the founder of the business, about the CEO as a business leader, and position them as an expert in the industry, as a leader in the area, and then tying that back to their company. So that's been a way to kind of pick up stories because a great business editorial is something that business outlets love to run when it's a great local business owner. So that's been a big push for us lately on clients where we're having a harder time finding a media angle related to their actual industry.
Yeah, and at Reed, is that something that y'all kind of allow the clients to, in reaching out and maintaining those media relations contacts, is that something that Reed handles for all of their clients, or is there, touch and go, maybe the client itself does a little bit, or is it just all Reed?
As far as outreach, is pretty much all us. Every once in a while, you'll get a reporter who, sends them a message through their contact page or through the email on their thing, and we train our clients to just forward those over to us so we can handle managing it. Our clients are very busy, so they hire us to do this. We're always like, let us take it off your plate. That's literally what we're here to do. We can help make it easy for y'all. So as far as outreach goes, that's pretty much all us. And then if they get any income things, we always do our best to have them send those our way so we can help manage that as well.
Yeah, and since we had discussed muckrack, and I'm really interested in that. Talking about sort of those, I guess, kind of niche maybe industries, does muckrack help maybe target or provide y'all with information on certain reporters who maybe cover stuff like that?
It definitely does. So every muckrack reporter, there's a page in there for basically every muckrack reporter, and they can edit that page as they want, or it can be a very general one. So there's some that like the person is in there and their profile is just their name and their email and nothing else. And there's some that have photos and it has their interests, it has the ways to reach out to them, what they're covering, what they're currently working on, what outlets they write for, etc. And so it's really up to the reporters to put that information in Muckrack, but a lot of them do, and it's super helpful to know like, oh, this person is currently covering Christmas, weird Christmas decorations that you can make from things you have at home, like a very niche thing, but
Yeah.
they'll put that in there like, this is what I'm looking for. And that's always helpful to see that.
Yeah, and sort of staying within this case study segment right here, what was one of your favorite stories you were able to get shared by the media? Maybe it was a big event for one of your clients, maybe it was like a special human interest type story. Just what's like a memorable, I guess, pitch or piece of information that you were able to get widespread?
Um, oh, that's a good question. Okay, let me think. I've been doing this for a while. Probably one of my absolute favorite pieces of coverage I've secured is with a luxury senior living community here in Nashville. We've been working with them for a while. I absolutely adore them. They do all kinds of super fun events, and it's just so exciting to go to that campus and get to talk to the seniors who live there and hear their stories. And there's so many of them with the most unique, interesting stories in the world. So this is kind of twofold because I have two pieces of coverage for this client. So I'm gonna talk about them both because they're so fun. But
Okay,
one of
yeah, go
them,
ahead.
one of them, we pitched a local reporter at the Tennesseans. That's our big print daily here in Nashville. He just likes to do, good news. He just likes to share cool stories. He has a weekly newsletter that he sends out that just shares good stories. He's the good news reporter. It's such a fun, feel good newsletter. And we pitched him a story about one of the residents at Blakeford, that's the senior living community, who helped bring ambulances to Nashville hospitals many years ago. So it used to just be that kids were throwing people in the back of their pickup truck and driving them to the hospital. And she helped bring ambulances here. And so he got to go to her apartment in the senior living community and interview her, and she had her old nurse's outfit and her daughter was there, and she pulled out pictures and told this whole great story about her life. And it was just so interesting to hear from her of like this entire experience that she's lived and get to place that. And it was such a sweet story in the newsletter. So that is one of them.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And then my other one, again, with the same senior living community, we just get to do a lot of really fun stories for them. So they, on Valentine's Day last year, did a vow renewal. So they invited the residents, to anyone who would be interested, to renew their vows in like a
Oh,
sweet
wow.
Valentine's Day ceremony. It was very cute. And so we got some pictures from that and sent it out to a couple local media reporters, and we actually were able to place it in the Nashville Lifestyles wedding edition. So they do an entire print edition of just weddings, and it's normally these big, elaborate weddings that they have with all these beautiful things. And so this one was so cool to get to place it in that magazine because it was a unique story compared to, I mean, these beautiful weddings that people have really designed are so gorgeous and amazing and they're wonderful, but they're not always, they're not like your everyday story all the time. So it
Yeah.
was so cool to get the sweet vow renewal in that outlet right next to those amazing weddings.
Yeah, props to whoever is doing, I guess, sort of event planning for them. That's something I've never heard of before.
Yes, they are amazing. Every time I email them asking about upcoming events, they send me like an email full of things going on, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, can I move in?"
Yeah, well, thank you for that insight and some of those specific instances in that case study segment. So another point I really wanted to touch on is I feel like the digital landscape, it's always changing, whether it's a new social media platform coming up, whatever it is the media relations landscape any different than when you first started, or maybe what small subtle changes have you noticed in maybe the way you reach out to people, or maybe what the publications are asking, whether it be ad space, whether it be some other form of support? What are some changes that you've seen?
So I will say since I started at Reed, I feel like it hasn't changed that much, but since I was learning about it in college to now, it has changed tremendously, and I do think COVID had a large part to do with that. But I remember in classes they were telling us we learned about Muckrack a little bit, but we really learned a lot more about Cision, which I'm just not using as often anymore. It's a different platform to find reporters, information, etc. It's similar to Muckrack, but Muckrack I think just offers a little bit more at this point. And I know a lot of the people that I'm working with also are just not using Cision as much anymore. Like it's something you have, it's a good resource if you can't find it elsewhere, but that one's not going to use as much. And kind of same with the Newswire. I remember we had like 2 weeks dedicated to the Wire and putting a release on the Wire in college, and I think I've done it once in my time at Reed. Like it's just not something that we do as often anymore, and I think that's because during COVID, reporters were covering very heavy topics a lot, and so we're trying to work better with them now. We're trying to build those relationships, and so putting a release on the Wire, you don't get that connection with the reporter at all. You put it on the Wire, and the outlet pulls it directly, which is great if you've got a very big news story to tell and you want it to be widespread, but you're not going to set up this great interview that way. You're not going to get to build a relationship with the reporter that way. So I feel like that's definitely something I was expecting to do a lot more in work that I have not actually really had to do at all. But other than that, those are kind of the two big ones. I think is just anything now to build a relationship with the reporter is really been the focus, which when I was in college, we were learning a lot more about the tools you could use to be efficient. And now you're not going to place a story if you're not really taking the time to personalize it.
Yeah, interesting. Media relations is one of those tough things because, in class, what I've learned a lot about is make sure you can measure the effectiveness of things, have your SMART objectives, make sure that you can actually have verifiable results of, whether it's a campaign, whatever you're doing. And so I guess what is your approach to measuring effectiveness of media relations work?
Yeah, so one of our core values at Reed is measurable results. So we are always pulling data whenever we can to share with the report or share with the client. Obviously, it's tricky because there's no direct like sales ROI from a story, so it's hard to quantify it to clients sometimes, but we like to look at the circulation numbers, the UMV, which is the unique monthly viewers on a website page, the following count, the engagement on a social post, people that have shared it. Well, even sometimes if we set up an interview, we'll be like, okay, so this was the main piece, but it's also you've been quoted as a source in 3 other articles since because of that interview. So like showing the reach is sort of our main measurable result there is like this has reached this many people, this many eyes have seen this, your name is in front of this many people. And that's been a big one for us. Obviously, whenever we place a paid piece, we're able to get a little bit more direct data from that, just because if you're paying for it, the outlet gives you like exact data that we aren't able to pull otherwise. But as a whole, there are a lot of tools out there to help you get some general readership and viewership numbers, and that's kind of what we use to measure those results and to give to our clients.
Awesome. Yeah, and so starting to end things here, what is, we're going to enter our call to action segment here. What is something that you urge those maybe in your position who have to deal with media relations a lot? Maybe what's sort of a tactic or maybe just an overall idea that you would urge someone in your position to do when working with the media, trying to get something out? Maybe just what's your advice for that?
I think my biggest piece of advice is to really take the time to personalize what you're sending. So you could, spend an hour writing a generic pitch with generic data and pitching it to 20 reporters, or you could spend an hour researching that reporter, writing a pitch that's really going to resonate with them, sending them a very personalized email. And either way, it's probably only going to result in one article. So if you're going to get one article out of it, you might as well make their job easier, build that relationship, kind of keep your client as that resource going forward for the reporter. So that's my
Yeah.
biggest piece of advice is just spend your time making a reporter's job easier.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Brooke, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a good rest of your day and week over at Reed, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yes, thank you so much. It was so nice speaking with you.
You as well. Thank you. Thank you for listening today. Make sure to join us next time to learn more about strategic communication for local businesses.